Mhm.
All right, y'all. We are here, the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders Podcast, aka the Whip Show, 106.1 FM, WAKT Toledo's community radio station. Now, normally, we come on this show, we having some fun, we clowning a little bit. But this time I want to get a little bit more serious with this one, man, because we had this gentleman on the show before. Um, we kind of wild that we have him back on here for this because we were talking about black representation in media. And
Mm.
now he's back into space again. And if you guys have been underneath a rock, if you watched WWE Bad Blood and saw the press conference this past Saturday night, this gentleman came up. He had a very direct question for Chief Content Officer, Triple H of World Wrestling Entertainment. I want to bring to you guys journalist extraordinaire. He's been in the political space, he's been in the sports space, and now he's running his own thing at the SoapBox Nation. TJ Legacy. What's going on, man?
Hey man, it's an honor. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I appreciate it.
Man, thank you for coming back, man. And whoo, like I said, you have been definitely the topic of conversation in the professional wrestling world for the last couple days, man. But before we go there, I do want to say this because I want to extend this from the Whip Show myself, and my guy Najee's down there in Florida as well. How you holding up, man? We know what's going on down there.
Right now we're holding up pretty good. Hopefully the connection is not going to interfere, but right now it's just a lot of cloudy skies, rain in and out, the winds. But I'm hunkered down. Family's good. Got our supplies and everything we need. So we're just kind of waiting out the storm.
Okay,
Make sure that everybody else is okay. So, but
that,
thank you for asking.
that's what prayers up from the team, man. Like I said, my guy Najee's down there too, so prayers up to him as well. But I want to jump right into this, man, and we're going to play the actual clip on the radio show, but we don't have it right here. But I wanted to
Mhm.
kind of briefly go into that. You're in the press box, the media, I mean, excuse me, you're in the media room, and as people know, they open up the questions. And your direct question to Triple H was what? If you could let the people know if they did miss it.
So my direct question was in reference to reports prior to the WWE PLE Bad Blood that there have been reports that black male wrestlers specifically have not been represented on PLE cards for the last three PLE cards. And then there was no black wrestlers on Bad Blood uh, of itself. So, my question to Triple H was, how does he gauge between making sure that there's, I should have said equal, but I said representation, and making sure that people or that wrestlers get opportunities that they deserve. That was that was the that was the question. I want to make sure that I clarify. It wasn't to negate black women because I saw a lot of that on Twitter to say, hey, he didn't mention black women. As a journalist, you need to deal in fact. And so the
Mhm.
fact of the reports that were out there were specifically about the lack of black male wrestler representation. Obviously, as a fan of WWE, a fan of pro wrestling for a while, WWE has Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, Naomi. The black women have been represented on PLEs and on WWE programming. And there's been NXT male wrestlers and female wrestlers that are represented. However, my specific question at Bad Blood was about premium live events and black male representation. And it was my line of questioning because of the previous reports from other outlets. So I wanted to make sure that I clarify that it wasn't to exclude black women and it wasn't to say that WWE doesn't have any black representation. A lot of times on Twitter and on social media, you got a lot of people that will listen to what they want to
Yeah.
hear rather than what's the actual fact of what the question was. And so I just wanted to clarify that. But that was my line of questioning.
No, okay, okay. Well, I'm glad you said that. Now, I want to talk to you about something else before we get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Triple H had his response. Now, before we get into his response, one
Mm-hmm.
thing about the media space, some people go into those wrestling press conferences a little different than normal media, as you would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Everybody's style is different.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes people throw softballs about the storyline. Some people talk about numbers. But I have seen this backlash towards your questioning, saying that you ambushed him. What would you say to somebody that thinks that you kind of put him in an ambush situation?
I don't think. Oh well, let me again reference. So there is some truth to that, and I'll tell you that there is some truth to that. And in fairness, because the reports that I read, right, it said that WWE. There was a source that said WWE is aware of the problem and that they are working to address it. So when I asked the question, it was to try to make sure that we get it on the record. What better time? We're in Atlanta. What better time to ask about black male representation and diversity than at this press conference to say, hey, so it wasn't a gotcha. It was just like, okay, they're aware of it. So I'm thinking from my understanding and from the information from the other reports was that, hey, WWE is aware of this situation and they're looking to fix it. That's what the report said. It wasn't until after my line of questioning, after the press conference, that I was made aware that WWE was not aware.
Wow.
And so he might have been, first of all, when you're there as a journalist, I'm going to ask any question that I want to ask, as long as it's an appropriate, it's in a line of what we're talking about. I'm not going to now. There are maybe other journalists or content creators that can ask, maybe some, like you said, softballs, comedic questions. Everybody has their own different styles. But for me and what we do with SoapBoxx Nation Run the Ropes, we're going to ask questions that are pertinent to one, the audience, and two, to extract information and to gain clarification. So he might have been taken aback because, and I'm just saying might, because from what I was told, they weren't aware. So there's conflicting reports saying that WWE was aware, and then from what I gather from my sources is that they weren't aware of the statistics and all those other different things that I had mentioned in referencing the articles. So there is truth to that. He might have felt ambushed because he was like, whoa, I wasn't ready for something like that. And I think because of the atmosphere of the press conference, right? So, like you mentioned, I come from a political space. I've covered college football. I've covered a lot of, whether it's politics, interview candidates, whether it's, hip hop, and I've done a multitude of UFC. Um, you're supposed to be prepared in media training. You're supposed to be prepared for anything. And I don't think that he was in such a pertinent question right off the bat. I do think he was taken aback. So, but it wasn't a personal attack. I wasn't personally attacking Triple H. It wasn't a gotcha question. It's not a like, hey, it wasn't anything like that because, let's be honest, a lot of the engagement that I got that was received for post this question I didn't receive. There was a lot of other outlets that got the 2 million engagements and the followers and all these other. So it's not like I'm doing it for sensationalism, um, because you're not really seen on camera. You're not, you're
Right.
not, they're not. It's not something that's like, oh, God, I asked Damian Priest a question, right? And my Damian Priest question, in all fairness, wasn't that great because the guy who asked the question before me asked the exact same thing that I asked, but he said it in Spanish, and I'm not fluent in Spanish. I know a little bit.
I
So when
get
I
it.
asked Damian Priest, in fairness, when I asked Damian Priest about being in the world title picture, he had asked the same kind of question. But as journalists, sometimes you're on your phone, you're setting up your thing, you're
Yeah, yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about
yeah.
your other question. So there's growth, right? So in fairness, I don't know. I can't speak to how he felt, but for those people who are like, oh, he was taken off guard. I do believe, based upon his reaction, I do believe he was taken off guard and he went to his. Well, I'm not going to say anything about his answer yet, but I do believe that he was probably taken off guard, but it wasn't malicious or intentional.
Okay, okay. Well, that sounds good, man. Because the response that the clip that everybody keeps putting up is when he says, "I don't see color," blah blah blah. And me and you have kind of actually talked about that even before this interview.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with his response, and like I said, I want to play this in the show so you guys have heard it if you didn't catch it live. With his response, you being the person that asked the question, how did you take that? And I have a feeling too, but I'm gonna let's see what you thought first.
I thought Triple H spoke from a position of privilege. he doesn't see color because he doesn't have to. Not in his world. Not in his world. I went back. If you go back to his answer at the press conference for WrestleMania in LA, there was a similar question that was asked pertaining to Charlotte Flair and Rhea not being the main event of night one, and it was over Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus the Usos. But it was posed as a gender question.
Mm.
If you go back and listen to Triple H's answer there to that at that interview, he gives practically the same answer
Yeah.
about, hey, I don't see, it's not about gender, it's about storylines, but he didn't invoke race. If you also listen to his answer, and I think a lot of people are forgetting, he says, I don't see the color. And I also don't, he also mentioned gender. I don't see the difference between men and women. I do believe, based upon his answer, I think it was a little disingenuous because you can just tell based upon the track record of WWE creative that what he is saying is not true. And I would like to expound on that, but like it was he spoke from a place of privilege, and I think that there is a opportunity there for a teachable moment for him to grow in his idea of what diversity and inclusion actually means or what representation means.
Yeah.
So, that's what I said. What is the difference? I said, how do you gauge representation and making sure that people get what they deserve? I don't think, or what they've earned. I don't think that he, at that time in a snapshot, gave it much thought. And so sometimes you can speak from that place of privilege, unbeknownst to you. And
That part.
I think and I'm only giving the benefit of doubt because I don't know Triple H personally. I don't want to say that I've asked him questions before, and it's not like he's not treated me fairly, but that doesn't mean that in the creative space that he's thinking that this isn't a problem. Sometimes they didn't. When you look at the divas, the give divas a chance.
Mm.
Obviously, representation matters because you did a entire women's evolution or revolution based upon women and their lack of opportunities. So to say that you don't pay attention to, or you don't see the difference between men and women, and you're just saying, hey, whoever has the best storyline or opportunities, they get it. That's not necessarily true based upon the creative track record.
I definitely understand what you said. I definitely agree with that because I mean I thought it was a very tone deaf response. I think it was just a normal response that people always say, no different than saying everybody's the same, and we know that's not a true thing in this world. But I do want to rebut this with from the outside. I don't know. I'm not sure how old you are, but I'm
Mhm.
44 years old. I've seen wrestling from way back to Coco Beware, Kamala, when we really didn't have a whole lot of representation at all. Now, what do you say to people? I mean, they were in Atlanta. Metro Boomin is doing the is the host, they're doing the theme song. Lil Wayne, we got Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, whoever else. I mean, they did a whole party with Bianca Belair in the room. What do you say to people like that? Because I think that was Triple H's thought process. Well, I got a million black people around here. So what are you talking about? So what do you say to people like that, man?
I would say that, again, my question was about black male wrestlers. This is pro wrestling. We're talking about being a competitor inside of the ring, not being used as a comedic skit, not being used as a host, not being used as a prop. We're talking about actual representation in the ring. Let me just say this. When you went to Montreal and it was Sami Zayn was highlighted because he's from Canada. They like you when you go to Canada, most of the wrestlers who are from Canada, they get highlighted. Rhea Ripley, when they went to Australia, she was in the main event. She's from Australia. Natalia, when you went to Canada, she made her return. When you go to Puerto Rico, Damian Priest is in the main event. You have Selena Vega. She's competing against Rhea Ripley. So when you go to Atlanta, and you have a black male wrestler like Xavier Woods, who's from Atlanta, and you have him in a potential match against the most popular wrestler in all of pro wrestling, Jey Uso. How is it that creatively to have that, not just representation, you're talking about storylines, how is that not on the card in Atlanta?
Yeah.
You see, so to me, so the history of, and let's just look at it this way. There is a lot of escapism when it comes to professional wrestling. I know it. We know it. We all grew up in it, right? I'll be 38. I'll be 38 in on Saturday.
Okay.
Actually, Saturday's my birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you, man. But there's a lot of escapism where you don't want to engage or think about race or think about politics and stuff. It's just like, oh, we just like our wrestlers. They're superheroes. They can do no wrong. You don't want to think about these things. But you referenced it. Look at the way that people of color, black folks, how we are being depicted. And this is not a WWE thing. I'm talking about all of wrestling. Representation matters. Roman Reigns even said it in his documentary. He said historically, Polynesian wrestlers were looked at as savages, and wild Samoans, and you got to look at Kamala and all these different Coco Beware and all these other different wrestlers, how they were all in these stereotypical type of creative roles within professional wrestling. If representation didn't matter, then you wouldn't have a Black History Month video package, vignette every single year about black male wrestlers and black figures, black male wrestlers and black women that are in WWE. It was a big deal when Bianca and Jade Cargill and Naomi were all teaming up. Three powerful black women were all teaming up at WrestleMania. You highlighted Sasha Banks and Bianca, two black women main eventing WrestleMania. WWE highlighted that. We didn't, it wasn't the journalists that did that. WWE highlighted. So it's not like they're not aware of that. So to say that, oh, we just do creative, that's why I say it was a disingenuous answer, because it's just simply, it's just simply not true. You're aware of what works. It's just as of right now, you have to highlight, wait a minute, why aren't there any black male wrestlers being featured on these cards? And then subsequently after, and you're like, hey, NXT's doing it. So what is the disconnect between the developmental? Because remember, NXT is developmental. And so Triple H's answer, if you look and you read through the tea leaves, it just came off as black folks are not working hard. The black male wrestlers aren't working hard enough. And that in itself triggers a lot of racial insensitivity, because that has always been a racial trope about black folks,
right?
Where it's just like, you're lazy, you're not working hard enough, the cream rise to the top, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't look for handouts. And you're not looking for, and I don't think black wrestlers, men or women, are looking for handouts. And I don't think the women are looking for handouts. I think they're looking for opportunity. And so you're never going to understand the opportunity that is not given until you pose the question. Until there was a Give Divas a Chance hashtag, WWE didn't address it. So why are people so triggered when you talk about black representation, but when you're talking based upon race, but they're not as triggered when you're talking about the women's revolution and when you're looking at representation based upon gender? I'd rather people just be honest with themselves and say, you don't want to talk about race because it's not important to you.
Okay.
I'd rather than be honest about I think it really illuminated some undertones within feelings, and people are like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to deal with it. So I'd rather you say you don't like the question because you don't want to deal with the topic, rather than saying that the question was stupid or inappropriate or it was an attack. Just say you don't want to talk about it, and just be brave enough to say you don't want to discuss the topic, because he also said he doesn't see the difference between men and women.
Yeah, he did.
And that is not true. But nobody's talking about the men and women part.
So let me say this to you then.
Mhm.
Now, we talked about this in our previous interview, talking about being in the media space. And sometimes we're African American people, I'm gonna just say black people in this space.
Mhm.
We talked about that we have to work doubly hard to get the same things. We both kind of agreed to that. But we also
Yep.
know that sometimes in this space, there are black people that don't like to rock the boat because they're scared somebody else is going to take their spot. Now, speaking of the wrestlers, do you think, because I'm not going to say any names, but there were certain wrestlers out there that act like they can understand why anybody would question that because I was the world champion before. So what are you talking about? Do you
Talking about
think
Booker
some?
T?
Say it. Go ahead and say it.
Okay. You talking about Booker T?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, very true, very true. And I love Big Mark, but even Big Mark said some stuff, and I'm like, Big Mark, come on, dog. We know the story of back when you used to whoop up people, and then you had to stop whooping them up because then they would give you a chance. But there are people out there that do that. So, do you think that maybe some of the wrestlers need to kick them in the mouth? Like, look, Triple H, dog, I'm doing my thing. Give me a shot. Or do you think maybe sometimes they are too passive and they're worried about their spot, and maybe that's why they're not getting the opportunities?
I don't know these. I don't know. You're talking about big. You talking about Mark Henry? He said something.
Yeah, he said something too. He said something too.
Oh, I didn't see Mark Henry's quote, but I'll just say, but I did see Booker T's quote. I've met Booker T. I've met him. So, and I've met his wife. Very lovely people. Booker T's very hospitable when it comes to talking with the fans and stuff. So, but I don't know these people. Again, I don't know these people on a personal level. I will say this: a lot of it comes from where you were raised, right? And a lot. I think Mark is from what, Texas.
Yeah,
Booker T's from Texas,
yeah,
right? So there's a little bit. So a lot of it is culturally where you are taught not to really rock the boat when it comes to, and I'll say when you're talking about the dominant white society, which obviously black folks, people of color were the minority, right? Um, it's a tough spot in corporate America, and I'm not just saying talking about pro wrestling. It's a tough spot in corporate America to take on the mantle and responsibility for all. Because
yeah.
sometimes, as you can see with even Colin Kaepernick, you can speak up for some and you could be
Hmm.
blacklisted, blackballed off your income. Now, I'm not saying that that's something that WWE or any of the companies have done, but you got to think these people got to eat too. So I empathize. I empathize with that. I don't agree with it, but not you can't expect yourself out of other people. So I didn't ask the question so that I can be the flag bearer for all racial topics within professional wrestling. I asked it because it was an appropriate question to ask as a journalist at the time, given the venue, given the what was being talked about on social media and the engagement. So that's why I asked the question. It wasn't to be revolutionary, but that's how sometimes changes happens where you
I
have
agree.
that spark and it snowballs. Now everyone can agree to disagree. Um, but I don't necessarily agree. I've only listened to Booker T's comments. I don't necessarily agree. He himself has admitted that he's been in some questionable storylines that had some racial undertones. Maybe, and I can't speak for him, but maybe he doesn't see an issue because sometimes just because there's just one and you're the one that made it doesn't mean that there's not other people that have been um, victimized by those same barriers to those glass ceilings. There's a
Very
lot
much.
of there's a lot of, and I'll just say it, and not just in professional wrestling, but in corporate America, there's a lot of tokenism,
Oh,
where when black people say, "Hey, this is my experience," then there's always well, look at him. You hear a lot of people say, well, look at look at Oprah. Oprah's a billionaire. She made it. Look at Obama. He made it. And it's like a lot of like you get your select chosen, and that in itself is a racial trope where you get your select chosen few to say that, oh, sometimes there you can be the outlier. You're not the rule. You're maybe the outlier. You're the exception. And sometimes the exceptions, get the platforms to speak for the majority, and it's not the majority's experience.
and it's always wild to me. I'm glad you brought that up that people do that. If you can single out one person instead of, you know what I mean? That shows you how bad it is. I even had
Yeah.
to tell a friend of mine that, she had, and I do as well. We have multiple friends of all ethnicities and all backgrounds.
Mhm.
However, I said, be very mindful of that you're not the friend because, oh, you're non-problematic. You know what I mean? So that's the black person I'm gonna be hang out with, but the other ones, well, we can't trust them. So, we have to be mindful of that. And like you said, especially in that corporate space. But you gotta
I would
go ahead.
I would say this. There's even in 2024, there's still a very real fear. You know what? A lot of people that I said is that a lot of, and I'll say even in media,
Mhm.
a lot of there's an undertone where if I ask this question or if I ask hard questions, I'll get my credentials taken away. I'll be blackballed. I can't, but that's not journal. That's at least that's not how I was taught. That's not journalism where you're afraid. That's not freedom of the press, where you're afraid to ask questions or you're afraid to try to get clarification or because you don't want to rock the boat or, hey, I might lose my job or I might lose my opportunity. And so I gotta say or be neutral and tell people, I don't know what they're talking about. Look at all the, you
Yeah.
know, post press conference. There's a lot of things that have happened, and I don't know if you want to get into that have happened that have shown that the question of itself and the topic has been legitimized based upon the response from the company.
Very much so. Very much so. And if
Mhm.
you go ahead, talk about it a little bit, man.
Well, I mean, I'll look at it, and again, when you ask the question, and then on it was Saturday, so all Saturday night, all Sunday morning throughout Sunday, it was the topic of social media.
Yeah.
Everybody's having think pieces, their articles,
Hmm.
tons of engagement about about black representation. People are having conversations about it. That's what we want. That's as
Yeah.
journalists. That's what we want to provoke. We want to provoke thought. Me as a journalist, I am not the story, right? You shouldn't even know who. And I think that's one of the reasons why they don't put us on camera anymore. I'm not the story.
Right.
We are just bringing out. We're trying to provoke thought so that we can further a conversation. Or journalists hold people accountable to what they're saying. Okay, you said that this is you don't see color. Okay, fine. But then the very next night, the first person we see, well, on social media, we see what? You posting pictures of Triple H with the black mare.
Yep. Yep.
Then the next post is with him with all the rappers and stuff like that. Because
Don't
there has
forget they put Obafemi, a big post about him on NXT, just him talking about the longest reigning. Now they've never had an individual post like that unless it was after they won a big
so
match.
so if you understand PR, and that's it, and let me just be very, very clear. I have never called Triple H a racist. Never. So anybody in my line of questioning was never about, oh, I think Triple H is racist because this is what other people. I've never said that. I've never insinuated that. I've never said that. So if anybody's trying to put that on me, that is unequivocally false. That's not where I was going with my question. Now that I'm not policing that. Now, if there's something that comes out where that is reported or somebody is making those type of claims, and I find it appropriate to ask a question like that, of course I will. Other people, based upon his answer, they have made the inference. So
Right.
it wasn't so a lot of times, there was a black journalist. I saw there was a media outlet that said, "Oh, that there was a black journalist." So call me an idiot and call me a dope. It was a pretty
Wow.
reputable media outlet. They called me call me an idiot, call me a dope for asking because they didn't agree with the question, and they said that they didn't appreciate. They said that they didn't want to be in the same room or be at the press conferences. Yeah,
Are you
yeah,
serious?
yeah.
Wow.
PW Insider, Dave something
Wow.
said they didn't want to be in the room. So let me just give historical context to your audience, if I may. There was a time, and I know you know this, in history and media, where our white contemporaries didn't want to share the same media spaces with black media members or journalists. And thus, we didn't get opportunities or access like they did. If you watch the movie 21, they referenced it with Chadwick Boseman, where the black journalist, he had to be in the stands with his typewriter and couldn't be in the press box with everybody else.
Wow. Yeah.
So when we have outlets that, because I didn't ask the question that you liked or you agreed with, you are now calling me, I'm not a journalist now. I'm not a credentialed member of the media. I'm some idiot or some dope. That's not just an attack on me, right? And the fact that you're like, well, I don't want to be in the same room with, I'm not going to show up. What happens if other members of media say stuff like that? If y'all are going to talk about black representation, I don't want to be in the press conference. What does that force a company? Not saying that WWE has done that or even insinuated that.
I know where you're going.
What would that force a company to then do to say, well, we can't get media outlets to show up to our press conference because these certain members of media could potentially ask questions about black representation? Naturally, they would what? Tell the people that would ask those type of questions, mainly us, you guys are no longer welcome. Would they do that with women? Would they say, "Oh, you asked about the women's revolution, or you that? Oh, so I'm not going to be in the same room. I don't want to be. It's not that. Hey, I didn't agree with the question. I don't even want to show up to the press conferences anymore. That's crazy.
That's
so. But then again, this is that shut up and dribble.
Yep.
Stop complaining. Shut up and dribble. Stay in your lane. We don't want to talk about it. And I'd rather people just be brave enough to say that. So I wanted to mention that. Back to the point about the aftermath of the question or the topic of conversation. The first person we see on WWE program after we talk about black representation is Sexy Red.
Yep.
We have to get out of and when I say we have to understand that not just because we say representation, it's through whose eyes of representation. When we look at the Oscars, it says, people are like, well, there's the same thing with the Oscars and movies. Like, wait, there's no black people that were nominated one year. And it said, there was a hashtag, Oscars so white. It's not about just getting opportunities because you are black, but it's just like, wait a minute. Sometimes when we ask for representation, the representation that you give us can't be the most degenerate representation of black society and black culture and say, well, here, we give it to you because that's what makes you comfortable. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
And then so we have Monday Night Raw, and then you also had the topic of Raw went from 3 hours to 2 hours.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people on social media that were complaining about how the women were depicted because they had that 5 on 5, the 10 woman tag match, and how they were like, oh, this looks like it's going to be back in the Divas days where women didn't get much opportunity. And so my thing was, okay, so now maybe we can have that conversation about representation. I don't see the difference between men and women. But if you looked at NXT, clearly where in all fairness, WWE has their most black talent is in NXT. Do you not think that NXT, the show of NXT, was a response to the social media questions and the press conference question and engagement?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
And it was advertised before, but the fact that with Trick coming out with the championship, and they even realized, oh, there's a lot of champions in the NXT. I love NXT. I think NXT is the best wrestling show out of all the brands. I think they do a fantastic job within NXT in their building. But NXT is still developmental. Again, the question was about PLEs. It was about premium live events. So showing me that you have, including the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, and you have all the black champions showcased on NXT, which is great. That's awesome. But it still rings true that you're saying, it's almost like, well, this is the developmental. So they're not on the same, you're still indirectly saying they're not on the same level as the main roster, and they're definitely not on the same level as the PLE, which was the original topic of conversation.
So,
So to me, I just look at it as there's validity in the topic, and by the response, I just think that we also need to, and I don't want to take up your host, but
no, you're good.
that to me, the NXT thing was clearly in the PR was clearly their response. In fairness, I did reach out to WWE to ask to see if Triple H wanted to do a one-on-one interview to clarify his comments. And I did ask WWE if he wanted to expound on his comments and to further the expound on the topic and to have more of a conversation about the topic. I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, I've heard.
I'll say
Okay,
yet.
okay,
I'll say
okay.
yet. Hopefully,
Now,
I get that. Hopefully, I get that opportunity.
one thing that we talked about before this, also, I told you, WCW back in '99 had an issue just like this.
Hmm.
It was Hardbody Harrison, Elix Skipper. It was a whole group of them
Mhm.
sued WCW for how they depicted black wrestlers. And I think they also had a couple other backgrounds in there as well, because I believe Sonny Ono was part of it as well. But that's what they talked about. This is during the time Vince Russo was there.
Yeah.
Right after that, literally, if they have 4 champions, 3 of them was black. I'm talking about the next 2 weeks. Guys, like I said,
Who were the champions?
prime time Elix Skipper won the cruiserweight title.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hardbody Harrison won. Like, if I tell you this guy, then if you go look him up, he actually went to jail for like pimping or something. But he ended up
Mm-hmm.
winning like the TV title. So they literally started giving the belts, and I think that was one of Booker T's quick big reigns or whatever.
That was who did they
Booker
select?
T. Booker T. So with that being said, that was their response.
Okay.
And I think you know how they do. They paid off the lawsuit after because Eric Bischoff stated that, of course, same thing. I don't see color. I don't know how you guys would think that. But this
Yeah.
is in '99. We're in
Mm-hmm.
2024 now, and
Yeah.
we having the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you first is: do you think there has been progression in the world of wrestling in general? And do you think, what would you say, how can we really remedy this whole situation on the main roster?
Uh, I do believe that there has been progress when it comes to representation, meaning the volume of black wrestlers. When I was younger, I think it was your show. I said I was separated when I was in junior high. They said separated at birth. It was me and Mark Henry, when they do the superlatives, right? And for me, I was a big fan of Shelton Benjamin. I was like, wow, this dude is athletic. He's fast. He's an intercontinental champ. So the volume of black representation, I believe, has gotten better within professional wrestling. Even if you look at AEW with Swerve, with all the different black representation in professional wrestling. However, where pro wrestling as a whole falls short is the character development and the depth of the characters in the storylines that the black wrestlers, men and women, that they are involved in. That has not gotten any better. I will just say this. I have met a lot of these wrestlers, whether it's from all ethnicities, right? But there's no depth. If you look at the way that black women are depicted in professional wrestling, these are educated black women. A lot of them have gone to college. A lot of them have degrees. Bianca went to Tennessee. Jade Cargill went to Jackson. I think it's Jackson State,
I
Jackson
was going to
University.
ask you, can we pull the curtain back, man? Can we pull the curtain back? Because we talked
Yeah,
about the other day that Bianca Belair saying stuff like, girl, you stinking. What did I tell you? I never got a chance to interview her, but I just don't believe that she talks like that. And what was your response to me?
I've interviewed Bianca. I've interviewed both Bianca and Montez Ford. I've interviewed and I've been around at a premiere and I've seen her. I've actually gotten to see like her family and get interactions. I've spoken with Jade Cargill. I've interviewed her multiple times. Even Carmelo Hayes. These are educated. Obafemi went to Alabama. Chuck Williams went to the University of South Carolina. Kalani Jordan went to Michigan State. Jada Parker went to LSU. These are not people that talk in this accent, this girl. It's like there's no depth. They all talk like that. And that is a problem where we can't see. It's either you are the I'm gonna say it. Look, hey, big menacing black guy. You are sassy black woman. You are hip hop black guy. You are racially ambiguous, and the racially ambiguous folks that can be any race, they're the ones that don't talk in that girl they're the ones that don't talk like that. And then you also have the fifth one when you do have a black man wrestler, you're deemed as androgynous.
Yeah.
Those are the five archetypes. Tell me if I'm wrong. If you go back and look at wrestlers, you'll be like, oh, that they don't fit in some way or fashion, that they don't all fit into that same type of category. Or they're a comedic relief. New Day made something that could have potentially been offensive and turned it into something that they made it their own. But remember what it was supposed to be. They kind of shaped it and molded it and fought a lot to have it be what it was. And even then at its peak, New Day at its peak, people kind of were like, all right, this is kind of.
But let's tell the people what it even originally was. Stereotypical black choir singing. You remember that, man? And what it was supposed to be? Then it was kind of a Nation of Domination takeoff. So even then it was all still a stereotypical African-American characters.
And to me, it's just, I think from the Nation of Domination to, even if we go back to Kamala, to Bad News Brown, to Junkyard Dog, when you look at those type of, to Coco Beware, when you look at that type of representation to where we are now, we need to have an evolution. We need to have an evolve. You're now recruiting collegiate athletes. These are people that are articulate, that have education, that travel the world, that have different experiences, that have degrees, that have played. They have all sorts of things that you can highlight, but for some reason, they're all playing a lot of the same stereotypical roles. Yeah. And it's just like, even Xavier Woods, I think does he have like a doctorate?
Yeah, he does.
So there can be growth where you can showcase and highlight that. But to me, and these are even Lash Legend, Jakara, like I've talked to these people. Like, so it's not something where I'm like, oh, I think, no, I've talked, they're nice. A lot of them have a humble spirit. A lot of them aren't on that whole like, boy, bye. Right. They're not doing that. They're just really not doing it. And I hate to burn, and I know everybody plays a character, right? There was one time Cody Rhodes was playing Stardust, right? What I am saying is that why is it that there can't be, now if there was one, I can understand it. It doesn't, why is it that it's all on the same type of spectrum? And why is it that there's no depth? There needs to be more, and I agree that there needs to be more depth to characters when it comes to the black characters. Let's look at the Samoans.
Yeah.
Look at the Samoan dynasty. They have made sure that, hey, we are not going to be depicted. The whole purpose of the bloodline storyline is, hey, Solo's new bloodline is basically reverting back to the old ways that Roman said that he wanted to get away from. The Polynesian savages, the Samoan werewolf, that Tongaloa does, and all sorts of stuff. That is what they are depicting, like the old guard, the more vicious, violent part of the Samoan dynasty. Roman wanted it to be a more business-like oriented, Sopranos, Goodfellas, mafia type, depiction. That's what they wanted. and so there's some growth there, even with Jay Uso, what he's doing now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's some growth there. You can applaud WWE for embracing Black culture as entertainment, embracing hip hop, embracing it's everywhere. Meek Mills and Lil Wayne and all this stuff. But that's not the only type of depiction of Black society that you can showcase.
That
So
part.
there's room for growth and expand. And I think that WWE Creative needs to look at that and say, okay, maybe we can showcase that. Kalani Jordan doesn't talk with the whole girl,
Mm-hmm.
but her look is a little different,
Yeah,
right? And I
yeah.
think, and if you watch NXT, she's not as. I think the reason why they kind of paired, and this is just my analysis, um, the reason why they paired her with Bianca and stuff. If you're Bianca and Jade Cargill, if you watch NXT and you go down to Orlando, Kalani Jordan is very athletic. She is a hard worker in the ring. She can do a lot, probably more so than most. But she is not over as a babyface. I actually think
Mm,
Kalani Jordan is a natural heel. But that's a
mm.
topic for
So
another
I forgot
conversation.
to ask you this earlier, but I want to jump in with this also. Bobby Lashley left WWE. And if you know on Bobby Lashley's, he did a podcast after he left, and MVP made some statements as well about Chief Content Officer Triple H. If you're familiar with
Yeah.
those comments, Bobby Lashley said he felt like he had a better relationship with Vince, that Vince understood him better. He said he just doesn't think Triple H really understood him. We know what happened with the Hurt Business, which were those guys were a character totally different than the normal black thing that we get. They were almost more like the bloodline almost.
Mhm.
But MVP made a statement. He said, I never said Triple H was racist, just like you stated. But he did say that he pretty much questions a lot of the things they do with the black talent. What do you think about when you hear actual talent saying that?
I think isn't Wrestle Dream for AEW? Isn't it October 12th? Isn't it this
Yes.
weekend?
Yes.
I think the conversation of Black representation is going to be magnified. If Bobby Lashley debuts this Saturday, because I believe Swerve is coming back.
Okay.
And so there's gonna most likely be a segment with MVP, Shelton Benjamin, Prince Nana, and Swerve, and maybe Bobby Lashley attacks Swerve, and it's gonna be on their pay-per-view. Um, it's only gonna magnify what WWE is not doing on the main roster. The Hurt Business was special because again, it broke the mold.
Yep.
They weren't shucking and jiving. They were wearing suits. They were handling their business. They were in Cedric Alexander. They were Cedric Alexander, Shelton Benjamin. They were excellent in the ring, and so yeah, it was an outlier. I don't know. Like I said, their comments as far as their personal relationships. Again, as a journalist, I don't know. We can only deal with facts of what we see. But when we're talking about, even if we go back, I think if you saw when they talked about when's the last time black male wrestler had a singles victory? I think it hasn't been since Bobby Lashley pinned Austin Theory. I
Wow.
believe, and somebody can fact check if somebody fact check me, but I believe it was SummerSlam when Austin Theory when Bobby Lashley pinned Austin Theory for the United States Championship. Fact check me if I'm wrong on that.
Wow.
But when you have that being the last time African American a black male wrestler had a singles victory on a PLE, and that wrestler is now working for the other company, along with MVP, along with they're
Yeah.
like there's like whoa, what is going on? We're not talking about women's representation because that is not because we're seeing it. We know Bianca is undefeated. Mind you, to go back for all the people that were saying he didn't talk about black women, I am the first journalist to reference the streak and bring it up to mainstream. If you go back, look at the press conference at WrestleMania in LA, I was the one that asked Bianca Belair about the streak. WWE actually clipped that and put it on their own social media. Bianca's And then they started running with Bianca has the streak. So this idea that, oh, he's just excluded, no, they're being represented. I believe the whole formula for NXT is to try to find another Bianca Belair. Mm. To find another collegiate athlete that can basically pop like that. Like they all and they all look up to her. Bianca is a trailblazer. Bianca Belair. What she is not getting enough credit for what she did, what she's doing this year with being a tag team, being humble enough, being a team player with being tag team partners with Jade Cargill, being, everyone in NXT. If you ask them about the women and who they look up to or the matches that they all reference Bianca. She is a leader. Right now. Bianca Belair is a WWE Hall of Fame. Like if she was to leave right now, she's a WWE Hall of Famer, and she's having a Hall of Fame career, and she's a trailblazer in this industry. She's on that same. Everybody talks about the 4 horsewomen. Bianca Belair is right there when it comes to historical significance. And dare I say, I believe she's surpassed some of the 4 horsewomen when it comes to the impact that she's had on professional wrestling. And she's still young, in the game.
Totally agree.
But I think that, when you talk about it's only going to get magnified. But we'll see. I have a prediction that Carmelo Hayes is going to be on Crown Jewel.
We talked, yeah, he said that.
I think he's going to win that championship. I think he's going to win the United States Championship at Crown Jewel.
They're going to pull that Eric Bischoff what he did WCW. Give him all the belts, man.
Listen, because what do you think people are going to want to talk about if they see the card for Crown Jewel and you don't see a black male wrestler on Crown Jewel?
Because you're right, because it's in their mind now. You're right.
And that's what journalism is. It's like, wait a minute, I didn't know this was an issue or this was a thing. Now let me see. But on the flip side, people are going to say, see, they can shut up and dribble. They put Carmelo on the PLE so you could stop talking, you could stop complaining. No. That doesn't work because you don't do that with women. So we're not going to do that when it comes to, people of color. We're not going to do that when it comes to black representation, whether it's men or women.
Facts, man. Well, TJ Legacy, man, thank you for your time. I'm glad we had this conversation because I really wanted to open up a little bit more because, like you said, a lot of people just heard the one bite and they didn't get the whole full thought and the full concept of what was going on in that pace. Is there anything else you want to let the people know before we get out of here?
Not as far as wrestling wise. I guess when we talk about representation, if you don't mind me saying this, and I don't know if you want to cut this, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So, I want everyone who's maybe your listeners, I think I'm an imperfect ally. And so I'm a victim of sexual assault, victim of narcissistic abuse, but I think we need all hands on deck to promote awareness and accountability when it comes to the space of domestic violence. So if people need help, reach out to the hotlines and make sure that you are there. And just want people to know that they're not alone in the situation, specifically men and women. 1 in 3 women are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 4 men are. And a lot of times men don't report a lot of the violence that they receive, and it's not gender specific. So that is something that is personal to me. It may not be the most appropriate for your platform, but it is something that, as I, with support groups, batterers intervention, something that you want to make sure that people know that there's resources for them to get help, both men and women, and to encourage people to, again, like these topics of representation, again, to have these conversations to illuminate something that we can do to hopefully we can rectify and resolve the problem. So that is something in October that I think everybody also needs to pay attention to. But I thank you so much for having me on your program, man.
Salute, man, for that. And I'm glad you even opened up talking about that as well. Because like you said, this is the wrestling world. We talk about it. But when we had our conversation about black media and the mess, everything, it's just bigger than one thing. So I'm glad you actually touched on that as well, man. So you guys heard them. If you need anything, I'm always open. People know on my social media, we can talk about whatever. We keep it between me and you or whatever. Or Call the hotline, so we need to talk, get some help, man. But TJ
Absolutely.
Legacy of the SoapBoxx Nation, runners, I definitely appreciate you as well, man. And please stay safe down there in Florida, man. Please, all right?
Will do, man. Will do. You guys be good. And hey, anytime you need me, I'm here, bro.
Sounds good, my guy. Take care, y'all. And we'll be back right here, The Whip Show on 106.1 FM, WAKT, Toledo's community radio station.